My name is Chloe Mercer. I'm 29 years old. The first thing I heard was the scrape. Dry cardboard dragging across hardwood upstairs. Slow, careless, familiar. Then my mother's voice cracked down through the stairwell, sharp with effort, impatient with power, barking directions like she still owned every wall in that house. Not that one first. Take her bedroom things first. She'll make a scene over the sentimental stuff. I was still standing in the foyer with my keys in my hand. I had not even shut the front door yet. The house smelled like dust, lemon polish, and that stale trapped heat old homes get in late September when the air outside is humid and the air inside has been sitting with resentment all day. The front door was hanging half open. The brass lock I had paid to replace last winter was scratched around the plate, crooked in a way that made my stomach go tight immediately. For one stupid second, I actually thought maybe I had the wrong house. That is what certain families do to you. They can make you question a doorway you've walked through 1,000 times. Then a mover in a gray company shirt came backward down the stairs with my blue storage trunk in both arms. My trunk. The one that had sat at the foot of my bed since college. Behind him, another man was carrying the framed print from my office wall. The one I bought the week I got promoted because I wanted one corner of the house to look like it belonged to me. At the top of the stairs, my mother stood in white capri pants and a navy sleeveless blouse flushed from the heat, pointing with that same hand she used to point at me across dinner tables when she wanted to correct me in public. And my father was in the upstairs hall holding a roll of packing tape like a foreman supervising a job. "Take everything in the back bedroom too," he said. "That room's getting repainted." My jaw locked so hard it hurt. My mother saw me first. She did not flinch. She did not look embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like I was late to my own removal. "There you are," she said. "Good. I told your father you'd drag this out if we waited." Then she started down the stairs, one hand on the rail, face set in that efficient little expression she wore whenever she was about to do something cruel and call it practical. "Your boxes are being separated," she said. "Clothes in one truck, furniture in another. We're not paying storage fees, so you need to decide by tonight where your things are going." I still hadn't moved. My father leaned over the upstairs railing. "Close the door behind you. The AC's running." That was the first thing he said to me. Not hello, not we need to talk, not don't panic. Close the door behind you, while strangers carried pieces of my life out of my house. I remember staring at the trunk. Not my mother, not my father, not even the movers. Just the trunk. The front corner still had the old silver LAX sticker from a trip I took when I was 23. I paid for that trip with overtime from the medical billing office and a tax refund I never spent on myself. My mother told 3 relatives I was irresponsible for going. Now she was sending the thing out the front door without even asking. But the old paralysis hit first. Not fear, not exactly. Conditioning. That childhood instinct that taught me to go very still when their voices changed. To read the room before speaking. To calculate which version of them I was dealing with before I picked my words. My mother reached the bottom step and stopped right in front of me. "You can stand there glaring," she said. "Or you can help, but this is happening today." My voice came out flatter than I expected. "What are you doing?" She gave a little breathy laugh through her nose. "Oh, please, don't start performing." My father came halfway down the stairs, tape still in his hand. "We're cleaning up the situation," he said. "You've stretched this out long enough." "You're removing my things from the house." My mother lifted her chin. "From our house." Yes." She said "our" like a verdict. I looked past her. One mover had stopped near the dining room. The other was standing near the open front door with my framed print tucked against his chest, looking like he was realizing this was not the straightforward job he'd been promised. My mother noticed that, too. Her voice dropped lower, which somehow made it meaner. "You are nearly 30, she said. "You mope for days. You hide in that office. You act like a tenant we can't get rid of. We've tried being patient." My father added, You've been told for months that changes were coming. That part was true in the ugliest possible way. 3 months earlier, my younger brother Evan had moved back to Charlotte after losing his condo in Atlanta. At first, my parents called it temporary. Then, it became conversations about making the house work for everyone. Then comments about the downstairs office becoming a bedroom. Then comments about how I was always planning to leave anyway. Then little jokes about how a grown daughter living at home made people ask questions. They never said eviction. Families like mine never use the sharp word first. They prefer softer ones. Transition. Fresh start. Temporary shuffle. Realignment. It keeps the knife clean. Meanwhile, I was the one covering the mortgage draft when it came up short. I paid the internet bill. I handled emergency plumbing twice. I replaced the water heater in February when it died. I spent Saturdays at Home Depot or at county offices because my father hated paperwork, and my mother treated mail like personal disrespect. And I worked from home 3 days a week for a healthcare company and still somehow got described as the one drifting. My mother crossed her arms. Evan needs stable space, she said. He has a real chance to recover if he's not couch hopping. So you're giving him my room? My father's face hardened. We're reclaiming the house. That word hit harder than it should have. Reclaiming. Like I had been squatting inside my own life. Like every bill, repair, tax payment, insurance draft, an invisible task I had carried inside those walls meant nothing because it came from me. I set my keys down on the foyer table very carefully. The movers watched. Outside, through the open door, I could see Mrs. Alvarez from next door, walking her little tan dog down the sidewalk. She slowed when she saw the truck in the driveway. Yet 2 boys on bikes were circling near the mailbox cluster at the end of the cul-de-sac. Across the street, a grocery receipt flapped under somebody's windshield wiper in the heat. Everything looked painfully normal. That almost made it worse. Who hired them? I asked. My mother blinked. What? The movers. Who hired them? I did, my father said. Under whose name? A tiny pause. Tiny. But there. My mother's eyes narrowed. What difference does that make? Who told them they had permission to remove property? My father gave me that smile he always used when he thought I was hiding behind details because I couldn't win the bigger argument. I'm not doing this with you, he said. Pack what's left and stop embarrassing yourself. Did you change the locks? The back one, my mother said. Because you keep acting like a guest and forgetting your keys. That was a lie. I had not forgotten my keys in months. I slipped my hand into my purse and wrapped my fingers around my phone, but I did not take it out yet. Something settled over me then. Stillness. People think the dangerous moment is when somebody starts yelling. It isn't. Sometimes the dangerous moment is when somebody stops shaking. My mother saw my face and mistook it immediately. There, she said. That face. Like the whole world happens to you. Then my father turned to the movers and said, Keep going. One of the men cleared his throat. Sir, he said carefully, just so I'm clear, all this furniture is staying local, right? Yes. And the homeowner has authorized removal? My mother stepped in fast. Yes, no hesitation. That was one of their real gifts. They never feared a lie when authority was listening. I finally pulled my phone out. Interesting, I said. My mother's mouth tightened. Put that away. I am not doing one of your little recordings. I'm not recording you. I opened my email. The folder was starred, saved, backed up to the cloud and an external drive in my office desk upstairs. County clerk, case number, certified deed copy, transfer acknowledgement, trust memorandum, notary seals. I had kept it for almost 4 years, untouched, but never forgotten. I looked at my father. When you hired them, I said, did you give them your name as owner? I do not need your permission to run my household. That wasn't my question. My mother threw her hands up. This is why nobody can live with you, she snapped. Every conversation becomes a courtroom. No, that was exactly the problem. They hated facts because facts did not bow. I took one step toward the stairs. My father came down another step, like he might actually block me. He was 63 now, broad shoulders, slower than he used to be, still carrying himself like the loudest person in the room automatically became the right one. You will not make a bigger problem today, he said. I'm about to make a smaller one. Then I turned to the mover nearest the door. What company are you with? He hesitated, looked at my father, then at me. Queen City Moving and Storage. Who's your dispatcher? Ma'am. Because in the next 30 seconds, I'm either calling your office to explain that you're participating in unauthorized removal from a property without owner consent, or I'm calling the police non-emergency line and letting them sort it out in front of my neighbors. My mother actually laughed. Listen to her, she said. One legal drama, and suddenly she's a district attorney. But the mover stopped moving. That mattered. I looked up at my father on the stairs. You should tell them to put everything down. He stared at me. Or what? Some people only hear danger when it finally includes their name. Or I show them the deed. Nobody moved. Outside, Mrs. Alvarez had fully stopped on the sidewalk now. Her dog was sniffing a hydrangea bush while she stared toward our open door. My mother smiled then, that thin, dangerous smile she used when she was about to insult me in a softer tone. So, you are not going to stand in my hallway and threaten us with documents you don't understand. I looked right at her. That's a sentence you should have saved for a mirror. 5 years earlier, my parents signed the transfer papers. Not because they trusted me, not because they were generous. Because my father's contracting business was sliding under old debt, and an attorney connected to my grandmother's trust told them one way to protect the house from certain exposure was to move title into a cleaner name while the estate settled. Cleaner name. That was the phrase. At the time, they treated me like a coat rack with a social security number. Useful, quiet, not central. I was 24, sitting in a beige law office beside a fake ficus while my mother scrolled through Facebook and my father signed whatever was put in front of him. They kept saying temporary, paperwork only, asset protection, family housekeeping. They explained almost nothing because they didn't think they had to. They assumed the house would remain theirs in every way that mattered. Then my grandmother's handwritten addendum surfaced during probate review. It wasn't dramatic, no secret vault, no thunder, just one clear line. If the residence transfer proceeded into my name for protection purposes, it was not to be reversed without my written authorization, because, in her words, Chloe is the only one who ever cared for a home as if people lived inside it. I found that out 6 months later when the attorney, Mr. Sanders, they called me back in privately. He looked embarrassed. He also looked impressed. He slid the trust memorandum across the desk and told me 2 things. First, my grandmother had not been blind. Second, if I wanted real control, I needed to learn the difference between being listed and being protected. So I learned. Quietly, I paid the homeowner's insurance from then on. Had the statements mailed to a separate P.O. box because my mother opened everything that came to the house. I verified the deed through the county portal twice a year. I kept certified copies. I handled property taxes when they forgot. I stored everything in labeled folders. I said nothing unless I had to. Some kinds of power arrive in whispers. That is exactly why arrogant people miss them. Back in the foyer, my father came down the last steps. Yeah, he was close enough now that I could smell old coffee on his breath and the ghost of sawdust in his shirt. You're being dramatic. You're directing paid removal from a property you do not legally own. Title holder, my mother muttered with a snort. Listen to you. I've been listening to you my whole life, I said. This is more interesting. The mover by the door slowly set my framed print down on the console table. Smart man. My mother turned on him instantly. Do not stop. We are paying by the hour. Actually, I said, you might be paying attorneys by the hour. Enough, my father snapped. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. You will not humiliate us in front of strangers. There it was. Not you will not lie. Not you will not escalate. Humiliate us. Because this had never really been about space. It was about narrative. Daughter out. Son restored. Parents in control. That was the real floor plan. I tapped Mr. Sanders' office. It was 3:12 on a Thursday, late enough that I expected voicemail. Instead, his assistant answered. Sanders and Cole. This is Chloe Mercer, I said. I need Mr. Sanders or anyone who can verify property ownership for 418 Willow Ridge Drive immediately. There are movers here removing contents without my authorization. That changed the air. My mother's face lost color first. Only a little, but enough. One moment, the assistant said. Hang up the phone, my father said. No. Chloe, my mother hissed, stop this. Do not make our family look crazy. You brought a moving truck. I put the call on speaker. Mr. Sanders came on less than a minute later, voice dry and calm. Chloe? Yes. I need verbal confirmation. On speaker, in front of third-party witnesses. Who is the titled legal owner of 418 Willow Ridge Drive? A beat. Then he said it. You are. One of the movers turned his head. Outside, Mrs. Alvarez took 2 slow steps toward the walkway. My father's face shifted in a way I had never seen before. Not anger, not even fear at first. Disorientation, like the floor had changed its mind about him. That's not what this is, my mother said quickly. Mr. Sanders kept going. The deed transfer was recorded and certified. There is no ambiguity. Do my parents have authority to remove property or change locks without my permission? Not as owners, no. If there is a dispute, I advise that you contact law enforcement and document everything. My mother leaned toward the phone. This was a tax arrangement. A convenience. We live here. Mr. Sanders did not rise to her tone. Mrs. Mercer, I explained the transfer repeatedly. Occupancy is separate from title. That house was paid for by me, my father said. That is not the same question, sir. Then came the silence. Not cinematic silence, not theatrical. Practical silence. Mover silence, witness silence. The sound of a lawnmower down the block. Mrs. Alvarez's dog tags clinking outside. My own breathing slowing for the first time since I stepped through the door. Thank you, Mr. Sanders, I said. I'm calling police non-emergency now. Do that, he said. Then, after a beat, and Chloe? Yes? Do not leave the property unsecured. Then he hung up. My father stared at me like I had turned into a stranger in front of him. My mother recovered first. She always did. Though she switched tactics so fast it would have impressed me if it had not been so ugly. So that's what this is, she said. You've been planning some secret little ambush against your own parents. You brought strangers into my house. Our house. Keep saying it, I said. It still won't make it legal. That paperwork was never meant to give you control, my father said. And yet, a clean sentence can do a lot of damage. My mother stepped toward me again, voice dropping into that low, urgent tone she used when she wanted to drag reality back into private family fog before outsiders could fix it in memory. You do not do this to us over a misunderstanding. You changed a lock, hired movers, and started emptying my room while I was at work. Because you force every issue. No, because living with you is like stepping around broken glass. Then why are you trying so hard to stay in my house? That landed. Hard. When I was 11, my mother slapped me once because I corrected her in front of church friends about a school fundraiser date. She said I made her look foolish. At 16, Evan wrecked my first used car and my father made me tell the insurance adjuster I had been driving because it would be cleaner that way. My mother said families survive by choosing the useful version. At 21, she stood at Thanksgiving and joked to a table full of relatives that I was too sensitive for the real world after I spent the whole morning cooking while Evan slept until noon. Everybody laughed because she laughed first. The cruelty was never random, it was administrative. They edited me in public until even I almost believed the redacted version. The movers began quietly setting things down. Good. I called non-emergency and reported unauthorized property removal and a lock change at my residence. The dispatcher asked if there was violence. I said no. Asked if there were weapons. No. Asked who held title. I gave my name, gave the address, told her I had deed documentation and attorney confirmation on speaker in front of witnesses. She gave me an incident number and said an officer was on the way. My mother pressed her fingers to her temples. Do you hear yourself? Police? Over family? You crossed that line before I got home. You've always wanted a reason, my father said. No, I said. I wanted peace. A reason is what you brought in a truck. That was when Mrs. Alvarez came all the way to the front step. Everything okay here? My mother spun so fast you would have thought a camera had gone live. Just family reorganizing, she said brightly. Mrs. Alvarez looked at the movers, then at me. I met her eyes. They tried to remove me from my own house. That was the first time I said it out loud. My own house. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt exact. Mrs. Alvarez's brows rose. Oh, that little word did more than shouting could have. Because now there was a witness with a fixed version. My parents hated witnesses. They preferred listeners. Listeners could be managed. Mrs. Alvarez, this is private, my mother said. You left the front door open, Mrs. Alvarez replied. Then she stayed. Not inside, not in the doorway, just on the walkway, close enough to hear. Far enough to remain respectable, the perfect suburban witness. My brother Evan pulled into the driveway 12 minutes later in the silver SUV my parents helped him lease after his condo collapse. He got out smiling at first, then slowed. Moving truck, idle movers, Mrs. Alvarez on the walkway, me in the foyer with my phone in my hand. What happened? He asked. My mother answered before I could. Your sister is being impossible. Evan came in with his sunglasses still on top of his head and looked around like he was arriving at an event he had been promised would go his way. That told me everything. You knew? I asked. He shrugged. I knew they were making changes. To my room. To the house. Then he made the mistake. They said you were finally moving out. There it was. Not a pressure tactic. And not a misunderstanding, not a temporary shuffle. They had already built the future without me in it. Probably told relatives too, probably church friends, probably neighbors, probably everyone except the person they were erasing. My mother folded her arms tighter. Because that was the healthy next step. Healthy for who? Nobody answered. Evan gave me the same dismissive smile he'd used since childhood whenever adults were already backing him. Chloe, come on. Don't make this nuclear. I need the downstairs office because I'm interviewing. Dad said the back bedroom can be mine, and then we can convert your space and… You were moving into my house, he laughed. You don't own this house. I opened the PDF and turned the screen toward him. Just enough. Certified seal, parcel number, my name. His mouth opened, and it then shut. It's not like that, my father said. It's exactly like that. My mother's face twisted. This is disgusting. Your grandmother poisoned you against us even after death. I almost smiled. Because there it was, the real offense. Not that I had proof, that someone had seen me clearly and acted accordingly. She didn't poison me, I said. She noticed. My mother's face went flat. Your grandmother coddled weakness. No, I said. She recognized labor. That one was for me, too. A young officer arrived 22 minutes later. Calm, tired eyes. Nameplate, H. Lawson. He took one look at the half-loaded truck, the family arrangement in the foyer, the mover with a clipboard holding it like it might explode, and slipped into that careful, neutral tone people in uniform learn early. Who called? I did. My father stepped forward too. This is a family misunderstanding. Officer Lawson raised a hand. One at a time. I showed him my ID, then the deed copy on my phone, then the property tax account in my name, then the email from Mr. Sanders. He asked if I had printed copies. I do. I went upstairs to my office, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the accordion file I kept labeled in black tabs. When I came back down, my hands were steady. That surprised me. Not because I was brave, because sometimes your body stops begging for permission the second proof enters the room. Officer Lawson reviewed everything, asked my parents who hired the movers, asked whether they had written authorization, asked about the lock change, asked whether there was any court order, lease dispute, formal eviction, or civil filing. There was none. My father tried 3 versions. He paid for the house. He had always lived there. It was a family arrangement. Officer Lawson heard all 3 and came back to the same point. I understand there may be history, he said, but based on title documentation, you do not have authority to remove property without her consent. My mother laughed bitterly. So children can just use technicalities to throw their parents away? Officer Lawson didn't bite. Good, officer. Ma'am, I'm not here to debate family roles. I'm here to keep the peace and clarify access based on what I can verify. I swear to God, that was one of the most satisfying lines I had ever heard in my life. Not flashy, not emotional, just clean. My father's ears went red. Evan drifted toward the dining room, pretending to check his phone, the coward's version of disappearing. Then the mover with the clipboard asked, Officer, do you need us to unload what's already on the truck? Yes, I said. My mother spun toward me. You would make them carry it all back just to humiliate us? No, I said. I'm making them return what you had no right to touch. That's reasonable, Officer Lawson said. My mother looked at him like betrayal had changed uniforms. And then came the next hour. Not dramatic, not loud, almost holy in how methodical it was. My blue storage trunk came back in first, then my framed print, then the boxes from my closet, then the cedar chest from my room that held school journals, old ornaments, and the cardigan my grandmother wore every winter until the cuffs went soft. Each thing came back into that house like evidence, like testimony. Mrs. Alvarez stayed long enough to see it all returned. 2 more neighbors slowed their cars. One of them, Mr. Hanley from the HOA board, rolled down his window and asked if the truck was blocking the hydrant. Then he saw the officer, the boxes, my mother standing on the porch in dry-eyed distress, and drove away with the delighted restraint of a man who lived on neighborhood updates. My parents had wanted a public correction. They got one. As the movers worked, my mother made one last run at family theater. Think about what you're doing, she said. Once people hear this, there's no undoing it. You should have thought of that before you invited witnesses. You're punishing us over paper, my father said. No, I said. Mo, I'm responding to behavior. You always need to be the victim, my mother snapped. I looked at the boxes they had packed from my room, my photo albums, my laptop stand, the basket with my grandmother's scarf, the framed certificates I never hung because confidence was considered arrogance in daughters and ambition in sons. Then I looked back at her. Victims beg to be believed, I said. Owners change the locks. Officer Lawson glanced at me then, just once. Small, respectful. I did not miss it. My father asked if he could speak with me privately in the kitchen once the truck was almost cleared. Officer Lawson stayed close enough to see us. Smart again. My father leaned both hands on the counter and dropped the performance voice. What do you want? That question should have come years earlier. Not now, and not when he needed something. when I needed a father. I stood near the sink. The stainless faucet I had replaced myself last spring reflected both of us in warped silver. I want you to admit you knew exactly what you were doing. I knew we needed change. You waited until I was gone. You changed a lock. You hired movers. You told Evan I was out. He stared at the fridge magnets instead of me. Your mother thought if we did it fast, it would be cleaner. There is no clean way to erase someone. You thought I would fold. He said nothing. That was yes. In the foyer, my mother had Evan backed into a corner, whispering fiercely, while he nodded along like a teenager being briefed before a lie. Then she raised her voice enough for me to hear. After everything we sacrificed. There it was again. The family invoice. Parents like mine never offered love as love. They offered it as debt, with interest. We ended up on the back patio near sunset because Officer Lawson suggested we separate for one final conversation about next steps. The sky over the fence line had gone peach and pale gold. Somebody 3 houses down had already strung early Christmas lights across a deck, either by accident or optimism. A dog barked. A plane moved low and bright in the distance. I handed my parents written notice restricting unsupervised access pending formal occupancy review. Mr. Sanders had emailed a template while the officer was there. I printed it from upstairs. Prepared people look cruel to people who depend on confusion. My mother read the first lines, and her face crumpled into outrage. Yet you are serving us notice? I am ending unsupervised access effective immediately. We live here, my father said. For now. Evan took one step back. Good instinct. My mother stared at me like I had suddenly become obscene. You vicious little girl. At 29, after paying taxes, insurance, utilities, repair bills, and years of invisible labor, nobody ever thanked me for. A little girl. The second I stopped obeying. No, I said. Just finished. Where do you expect us to go? My father asked. That depends on how hard you want to make the next 30 days. My mother actually gasped, a real one, like the idea that consequences could apply to her had just been invented on the patio. She tried guilt next, then grief, then religion. Duh, families forgive. Families also don't throw daughters out of homes they own. You'll regret doing this publicly, my father said. You made it public before I walked in. Then Evan finally spoke. Can we all just calm down? I turned to him. You were moving into my office. He lifted his hands. I thought they had it handled. That, I said, is the problem with being favored. You confuse being included with being entitled. He looked away. That line stayed with me long after. Still does. Officer Lawson left after documenting the dispute and confirming that no further property would be removed that night. He advised that everyone keep communication in writing. My mother rolled her eyes at that. Of course she did. Writing leaves tracks. And after the truck pulled away and the neighbors disappeared back into their houses and the street returned to its normal Thursday shape, I stood alone in the foyer with boxes around my feet and a headache rising behind my right eye. The house looked violated. Not trashed. Worse. Handled. Drawer contents on beds. Closet doors open. My office chair turned sideways. My winter coats slumped over the banister. The old family portrait from 2009 tilted against the wall because somebody had taken it down to move a lamp table. I carried my blue trunk upstairs myself, not because I had to, because some things deserve to come back under your own hands. In my room, the comforter was stripped halfway off the mattress. One pillow was on the floor. My jewelry tray sat open, earrings mixed into the wrong sections. And the top drawer of my nightstand had been rifled hard enough that the wood caught when I tried to shut it. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the quiet find me. This was the center of it. Not the officer. Not the deed. not my mother's face when the attorney said my name. This, the open drawer, the touched objects, the proof that they had not just wanted me gone, they wanted me editable. Families don't break in one day, they erode in patterns. A joke at your expense, everybody agrees, was harmless. A favor that quietly becomes your permanent duty. A holiday where your labor is expected and your hurt is called dramatic. A brother rescued so many times, he mistakes rescue for destiny. A mother who needs to be the center of every room. A father who rents out his backbone to keep the weather easy. And then one day, there are movers in your hallway, and everyone acts shocked that you finally learned the difference between blood and permission. I opened the trunk. My grandmother's cardigan was on top, gray wool, slightly rough. Her perfume was mostly gone by then, but if I held the collar close, there was still a trace of cedar and something powdery and kind. Under it sat a yellow legal pad. Her handwriting, a grocery list on one sheet, notes on another. At the bottom of one page, a line I had forgotten. A home shows you who people think gets to stay. I sat there with that in my lap for a long time. Then I got up and worked. I photographed every disturbed room. I made an inventory of every moved item. I forwarded the incident number to Mr. Sanders. I changed the Wi-Fi password, then the security code. Then the garage keypad, then every account attached to the property profile. I scheduled a locksmith for 8 o'clock the next morning. I checked the county portal one more time even though I already knew what it would say. I saved everything in 3 places. Control is not loud, it is complete. My mother started texting just after 8. You are destroying your family over ego. We can still talk if you stop this nonsense tonight. Your father is devastated. Evan had nowhere else lined up because we trusted you'd behave like a daughter. That last one almost made me laugh out loud. Behave like a daughter. Meaning surrender what is yours and call it love. I didn't answer. My father texted once at 8:43. Don't make strangers decide our family. I stared at that for a long time before replying. You made strangers carry my life out of my house. He never texted again that night. The next morning, the locksmith arrived in a red van with coffee in a paper cup and decals on the side. He changed every exterior lock while my parents sat in the breakfast nook watching like bitter aristocrats being evicted by modern plumbing. This is obscene, my mother said. The locksmith looked at me. You want satin nickel or polished brass for the front? Satin nickel. Practical, clean, harder to show fingerprints. My mother hated practical things whenever they didn't center her. By noon, Mr. Sanders had filed for formal occupancy clarification and recommended a clean 30-day managed departure instead of immediate removal, mostly because judges like orderly transitions, and because I had no interest in a screaming lawn scene with church friends driving by after Sunday service. I wasn't interested in chaos. I was interested in conclusion. My parents spent the weekend making calls. I know because I heard pieces of them. My mother in the guest room telling Aunt Denise I had become cold and unrecognizable. My father on the patio telling someone from church that legal technicalities were being weaponized. Evan on speakerphone telling a friend the situation was complicated. Complicated is one of the favorite words of people who benefit from blurred lines. On Sunday, they came back from church without me for the first time in years, and my mother found me at the kitchen island sorting copies into folders. The house smelled like pot roast and resentment. People are asking questions, she said. They should. You enjoy this. No, I said. I enjoy clarity. She looked thinner somehow. Not fragile, just less inflated. The shape arrogance takes when the air starts leaving it. Your grandmother always had a soft spot for you because you knew how to perform helplessness. I set the stapler down. I was never helpless, I said. I was cornered. Same difference. Only to people doing the cornering. She stared at me, really stared. Like for the first time she couldn't find the old weak seam to press. Then she said the quiet part out loud. You were easier before you knew what things were worth. Maybe that was the truest thing she ever said to me. Not because she meant money, because she meant me. But the next 3 weeks felt like living inside a waiting room for an ending that had already been signed. Everything was in writing. Shared spaces only. No removal of fixtures. No entry into my bedroom or office. No guest access without notice. My father hated every rule. My mother treated each one like a personal insult. Evan moved into an extended stay hotel the second it became clear his free landing pad was gone. He sent me one text asking if I could at least be reasonable about timing. I replied with Mr. Sanders's email address. He never wrote again. By week 2, my parents were touring rentals with a real estate agent one of my mother's friends recommended. They complained about everything: square footage, neighborhoods, rent, storage, parking, how humiliating it was to start over at their age. And I stood in the hallway one afternoon listening to that and thought, that is exactly what you wanted for me. To start over suddenly, publicly, carrying boxes. Perspective can be merciless. The final confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening after rain. They had signed a lease on a townhouse 15 minutes away. 2 bedrooms, tight garage, small yard. Nothing like the house my mother liked to perform inside. She found me in the living room with a folder of utility transfer forms and stood by the fireplace my father had promised to fix for 4 years and never did. I hope you're happy. That was never the goal. You took everything too far. You brought strangers to my door. And you answered like an enemy. I looked around the room, the rug I paid for, the lamp I repaired. Oh, the baseboards I repainted after water damage, the windows I washed alone every spring. Then I looked back at her. No, I said. I answered like the owner. She flinched. It was small. Maybe nobody else would have seen it. I did. My father came in then carrying one of the last boxes from the hall closet. He set it down and looked more tired than angry. This didn't have to happen. Then why did it? He gave me the old answer first. Things got out of hand. I said nothing. And maybe because the house was half empty by then, maybe because there was nobody left to impress, maybe because truth slips easiest when performance gets too expensive, he finally said it. We thought you'd let us do it. There it was, the entire architecture. Not that they thought they were right, that they thought I would yield. I nodded. Oh, I know. My mother started crying then. Real tears. Not because she finally understood me, because the world had stopped agreeing with her. We are your parents, she said. Yes. That should mean something. It did. It meant I had spent too many years confusing access with love. I picked up the utility folder and handed it to my father. Your forwarding address is on page 3. Mail redirection starts Friday. Any further communication about property or documents goes through email. That's it? My mother asked. That's the boundary. She looked at me like boundaries were vulgar. For some people they are, especially when they used to move through your life without knocking. They left 3 days later. No screaming, no big movie speech on the lawn. My father loaded the last boxes into the SUV and the rental van. My mother stood near the passenger door in sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Evan didn't come help. Of course he didn't. Mrs. Alvarez watered her front flowers very slowly. Mr. Hanley adjusted his recycling bins for a suspiciously long time. The neighborhood had not forgotten. I stayed on the porch. When my father came up with the final key, he held it out on his open palm instead of dropping it into mine. That was probably the closest thing to respect I was going to get. Take care of the gutters before winter, he said. I almost smiled. Even then, even there. A last tiny claim dressed up as advice. I already scheduled it. He nodded once. Then he went down the steps. My mother didn't say a word to me before she got in the car. She looked at the house, then at me, then away. So like the place itself had betrayed her by remembering whose name it carried. Their cars pulled out one after the other. Slow at first, then gone. The street went quiet after. Not empty, settled. I went back inside and shut the front door. The new satin nickel lock clicked under my hand. That sound went straight through me. Not huge, not dramatic, precise. I leaned my forehead against the door for a second. Then I turned and looked at the living room. Boxes stacked neatly. Dust lines where furniture used to sit. Late light across the floorboards. My house. Not only because paper said so, though paper mattered. Because I had finally stopped apologizing for staying. There is a kind of peace that only arrives after you become impossible to rearrange. I walked room to room that evening, the kitchen, the hallway, and my office, with the desk lamp still angled where I left it, my bedroom, as restored as it could be. I put my grandmother's cardigan back into the trunk and slid the trunk to the foot of the bed. Then I opened my phone and looked again at the deed copy, my name reflected faintly in the black screen. Chloe Mercer, owner. For years, that word scared me. It felt selfish, too big, too final. That night, it felt like oxygen. I stood in the center of the living room until the last of the daylight drained out of the walls, and everything turned gold, then blue. The house was never just a house. It was proof that someone had seen me, that I had learned, that quiet girls grow teeth too. And I'm going to pause here for a second. Yeah, because if you've ever had to fight just to keep your place in a room people acted like you were lucky to be standing in, then you know this story is not really about property. It's about permission. It's about the moment you stop waiting for love to look like fairness. So if that hit you anywhere real, comment the word "stay" below. Just stay. I want to know who understands that feeling. And if you've ever been the one everybody thought would fold first, keep listening. Because the lock clicking shut was not the loudest part. The loudest part was what came after. The silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels earned. Over the next month, I repainted the downstairs office. Not because I had to. Because I wanted the room back in my own hands. I replaced the hall runner my mother always said was too dark. And I had the dead fireplace repaired. I moved my desk so it faced the front window instead of the wall. I planted rosemary and white mums along the walkway because my grandmother used to say a house should smell alive before people even ring the bell. My parents tried a few more things at first. My mother sent one long email full of history, sacrifice, misunderstanding, and the usual emotional accounting. My father kept his messages short. Roof question, tax form. Did I keep the old ladder? Can he pick up the extension cord from the garage? None of it was really about the ladder. When people lose control, they go looking for handles. I answered only what needed answering. Nothing extra. No openings. No soft spots. Evan called once around week 6. I almost didn't answer, but I did. He sounded smaller than usual. Not sorry exactly, just inconvenienced in a more reflective tone. I didn't think they'd really do it like that, he said. I stood in my kitchen with a mug in both hands and looked out at the backyard fence shining damp after rain. Yes, you did. He was quiet for a second, then, I thought you'd work it out. With them? With everybody. That was the problem with him. He had lived his whole life mistaking other people's endurance for a natural resource. Working it out, I said, usually meant I lost something. He didn't argue. Then he asked if I was really going to keep the house. I let that sit. Do you hear yourself? I asked. What? You still sound like I'm borrowing my own life. He breathed out hard. I'm trying here, Chloe. No, I said. You're adjusting. That was the end of that call. And maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it is. But cold is not always cruelty. Sometimes cold is what's left after heat finally burns off and you can see clearly. By December, the house felt different. Not happier all the time, not magically healed, but honest. That matters more than people admit. I stopped eating dinner with my shoulders tight, stopped listening for the front door like it was an alarm, stopped pre-editing my own feelings before they fully formed. I put framed photos where I wanted them, hung the certificates in my office, bought a deep green chair for the living room and a new brass reading lamp, and a set of linen curtains my mother would have called impractical and lovely in exactly that order. For the first time in years, my choices did not arrive already defending themselves. That changes a person. At around Christmas, Mrs. Alvarez brought over cinnamon bread and pretended it was because she'd made too much. We both knew better. She stood in the doorway looking past me at the tree in the front room. "You've changed the place," she said. "A little," she smiled. "No," she said. "The place changed you first." I thought about that after she left. Because she was right. Or maybe more accurate than I wanted her to be. A home really does show you who people think gets to stay, but it also shows you what happens when you finally decide that person is you. By January, I had stopped checking the locks twice before bed. By February, I could walk into my old office without seeing Evan's imagined furniture in it. By March, my mother's name no longer tightened anything in my chest when it lit up on my phone. Now, that was the strangest part. Not forgiveness, not peace in the soft, pretty sense people like to post about, just the absence of panic, the absence of scrambling, the absence of that old reflex that made me think every conflict was secretly my fault if I could not solve it fast enough. That is freedom, too. Not the big movie version, the quieter one, the one where your nervous system finally stops standing at attention. My mother and I speak now, not often, never carelessly, always with edges. She still circles the past like it is a table she plans to rearrange if she just waits me out long enough. She still talks about those years as stressful for everyone. Still likes to call what happened a breakdown in communication. It wasn't. It was an attempted removal. Words matter, so I used the right ones. My father keeps things practical: weather, insurance, contractor referrals. He once asked if I was still planning to have the gutters cleaned before winter. I stared at that text and laughed in my empty kitchen. Some men will lose an entire house before they lose a habit, but I don't need him to become profound for me to be free. That is another thing I learned. Closure is not always an apology. Sometimes it is just pattern recognition with a deadbolt. And if you're still here with me, still listening, then you already know what kind of story this is. It's not the story where the family suddenly understands. It's not the story where one speech fixes 20 years. It's not even the story where justice feels good every second, because it didn't. Some nights I still sat in the quiet and grieved, not the house. Not the fight, the fantasy, the one where they might have chosen me without being forced by paper, law, witnesses, consequence. That version died, and I let it die, because some peace only arrives after the wrong hope leaves. The real inheritance my grandmother left me was not the deed. Not really. It was the interruption. She interrupted the family story about me, the one where I was too soft, too sensitive, too difficult, too small to matter unless I was useful. She left behind proof, and then I did the harder part. I believed it. That was the real turn. Not when the lawyer spoke, not when the officer nodded, not when the neighbors watched the boxes come back in. When I stopped needing my parents to agree with reality before I trusted it. That is when my life changed. So yes, the house is still mine. Yet the satin nickel lock is still on the front door. The rosemary out front is overgrown now, and the office walls are painted a warm clay color that makes the whole downstairs look steadier somehow. The blue trunk still sits at the foot of my bed, and every once in a while, when late light hits the hallway just right, I hear that line again in my head. A home shows you who people think gets to stay. These days, I know my answer before the question finishes. I do. I stay. And if this story meant something to you, if you know what it feels like to be treated like a temporary thing inside a life you helped hold together, then do what the brothers in those stories always ask in their own slick little way, and let me ask it mine. Hit like, subscribe, and in the comments. And tell me the moment you finally stopped apologizing for taking up your own space. I read those. I really do. And if you want more stories like this one, the kind where the quiet person is not weak, just underestimated for too long, stay with me. Because sometimes the softest voice in the room is the one that ends up keeping the house.